They said Roy DeMeo smiled too easily, a calm, polite grin that could disarm anyone, right before he decided whether they lived or disappeared. He wasn't born a monster. He became one, piece by piece, in the shadows of Brooklyn where survival meant learning who to fear and when to strike first. You gotta take care of problems before they take care of you, he'd tell his crew, stirring his coffee like it was just another morning. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of real men who built empires in silence and paid for them in blood. Roy was born in 1940, the son of Italian immigrants chasing the American dream through hard work and long nights. But Roy? He wanted more than a paycheck, he wanted control. By 16, he was already lending money to classmates. By 20, he was running small-time rackets from his car trunk. He looked ordinary, almost forgettable. But behind that calm stare, something darker was taking shape, a hunger that would one day feed on loyalty, power, and fear itself. He didn't know it yet, but his name would soon become a whisper in every backroom in Brooklyn. Roy DeMeo wasn't raised by criminals, he was raised by survivors. His father worked endless shifts at an ice plant, his mother scrubbed apartments until her hands cracked. Brooklyn in the 50s wasn't a place for dreamers, it was a place for hustlers. As a boy, Roy delivered groceries and collected tips with a grin that masked sharp calculation. He noticed who paid on time, who lied, who feared him just enough to respect him. Those early lessons became the blueprint of his life, kindness as camouflage, control as currency. At night, he'd watch the older boys in leather jackets leaning on cars, laughing like they owned the streets. He didn't envy them, he studied them. Every gesture, every smirk, every rule unspoken. Loyalty's a business, he'd later tell a friend. It costs you, but it pays you back, if you choose right. By his early 20s, Roy was living two lives, the devoted husband and father who fixed toys for his kids, and the silent collector who made grown men tremble when he knocked on their doors. But loyalty in Brooklyn was a double-edged sword. And Roy was about to learn just how sharp it could be. By the late 60s, Roy DeMeo's quiet intelligence had caught the attention of people who noticed everything, the Gambino family. He wasn't a made man yet, just a useful earner, the kind who made money without noise. He ran credit scams, loan sharking, and car deals that all ended in cash. His front was a neighborhood auto shop, engines in daylight, blood in the back room. People came in to fix their Cadillacs and left owing him favors. That's how his power grew, not through violence at first, but through obligation. He surrounded himself with loyal friends from the neighborhood, kids he trusted because he'd grown up with their families. They called themselves the DeMeo Crew. Their motto was simple, handle business, leave no mess. At first, it worked beautifully. Money poured in, respect followed, and Roy believed he'd found his formula: discipline, silence, precision. But when the money got bigger, so did the enemies. And Roy's calm control began to harden into something colder, something that didn't blink. One night, a deal went wrong. A man refused to pay. And that was the night Roy learned, fear was faster than friendship. By the mid-1970s, Roy DeMeo had become the quiet center of chaos, the man who made problems vanish. His auto shop on Flatlands Avenue wasn't just a business, it was a kingdom built on fear and precision. Every man in his crew knew the rules: speak softly, act fast, and leave no trace. Roy ran his world like a businessman. Every killing was logged, every loan recorded, every body processed. The crew called it the Gemini method. A handshake in the front of the bar, a bullet in the head, and by morning there wasn't a single fingerprint left to find. He'd stand over a glass of scotch and say calmly, "Clean work is good work. Don't make noise, make results." And they listened, because Roy's calm wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Money, respect, and silence, that was his holy trinity. He owned homes, cars, and loyalty bought with envelopes of cash. The Gambino bosses loved his profits, and for a while, he looked untouchable. But power is a mirror, it shows you everything except your blind spot. And Roy's reflection was starting to crack. The more power Roy gained, the fewer people he trusted. Loyalty, the thing he built his empire on, was now the thing that haunted him. His crew, once a brotherhood, had turned into something colder. They followed orders, yes, but behind closed doors, they whispered about Roy's temper and his paranoia. He started testing people, watching how long it took them to answer a question, how their eyes shifted when money went missing. He didn't just want obedience anymore, he wanted proof. One night at the Gemini Lounge, he stared across the table at one of his closest men. The air was thick, music low. "Tell me," Roy said quietly, "if you had to choose between me and yourself, who'd you save?" The man didn't answer fast enough. That was enough. From then on, laughter in the crew died out. Smiles became short. Every job felt like a test. The streets of Brooklyn began to whisper again, not about Roy's success, but his fear. And the thing about fear is, once it starts inside your circle, it doesn't stay contained. Because the feds were listening now, and they'd just found his scent. By the early 1980s, the walls around Roy DeMeo's empire were beginning to close. The FBI had files stacked a foot high, names, numbers, bodies that never turned up but were whispered to have passed through the Gemini Lounge. Surveillance vans parked down the block, watching through fogged windows while Roy still believed he was untouchable. He started checking his mirrors twice, then 3 times. He'd drive aimlessly at night, convinced someone was tailing him. "Roy, you're seeing ghosts," one of his crew said. He just smiled. Ghosts don't wear badges. His paranoia bled into everything. Meetings were shorter. Calls went unanswered. He even kept tape over his phone receivers. For the first time, silence frightened him, not because of what it hid, but because of what it confirmed. The FBI wiretaps were closing in, but so were his own people. The bosses had begun to question him, worried that his killings, too many, too messy, might draw heat to the entire family. Roy was caught between 2 predators, the law and his own loyalty. And both were waiting for the same thing, his first mistake. By 1982, the silence around Roy DeMeo had turned into an echo chamber. Every friend sounded like an informant, every shadow looked like a gun. The Gambino bosses had grown tired of the attention. They admired his earnings but feared his instability. Roy was no longer their asset, he was their liability. Inside the crew, trust was gone. Men he'd raised like brothers now flinched when he walked in. Rumors spread that Roy was talking to the feds, that he'd kept records of every job, every payment, every body. In a world built on secrets, that was a death sentence. He could feel it coming, the quiet shift in tone, the calls that stopped coming. One night, sitting alone in his car, he murmured, "You build an empire with fear, and it dies the same way." When the FBI finally moved in, they were too late. Someone else got there first. Roy DeMeo disappeared from the streets of Brooklyn the same way his victims had, quietly, efficiently, without a trace. A week later, his body was found in the trunk of his own Cadillac. Shot multiple times. His eyes still open, as if he'd seen it coming. Roy DeMeo never made it to prison, but his crew did. After his death, the empire he built collapsed overnight. The FBI swooped in, rounding up the men who once called him boss. In courtrooms across New York, the Gemini crew broke apart, one confession at a time. Those who survived prison spoke of Roy like a ghost who still ran things from the grave. Some called him a genius, others a monster. But every man agreed on one thing: he never begged, never talked, never broke. In isolation, behind bars, a few of his old soldiers began to write letters. One said, "He taught us loyalty, but he forgot what it cost." Another wrote, "The money was good, but the silence was louder." Even the FBI agents admitted it. DeMeo was one of the most organized, methodical killers they had ever studied. But without him, the machine stopped moving. The shop was closed, the bar abandoned, and the legend of Roy DeMeo drifted through Brooklyn like a warning. His body was gone, but his methods, they lived on in whispers. And some of those whispers were still making money. Time moved on, but Roy DeMeo's shadow didn't fade. Years after his death, the streets he ruled still carried his name like a curse and a lesson. Younger gangsters studied him, not for his cruelty, but for his discipline. The way he managed crime like a corporation, emotionless, exact. In aging neighborhoods, old men still lowered their voices when they spoke of him. Roy didn't kill for fun, one bartender said. He killed for order. But the irony? That same order destroyed him. His son, Albert, grew up trying to outrun his father's ghost. In interviews years later, he said, "He loved us." That's what made it so confusing. That single line captured the man perfectly, a father who hugged his kids at breakfast, then went out to make people disappear before lunch. Even now, criminologists study DeMeo's operations as a blueprint of organized efficiency and moral collapse. He was both a provider and a predator, a man who built security for his family out of other people's fear. But history is strange, it forgets the victims, and remembers the ones who caused the fear. And Roy DeMeo became immortal the day he stopped being human. Roy DeMeo's story isn't just about blood, it's about the cost of control. He built an empire on precision, loyalty, and fear, believing that order could survive chaos. But what he never realized was that fear doesn't build foundations, it eats them from underneath. In the end, every rule he lived by turned against him. The silence he demanded became the silence that erased him. The loyalty he bought became the bullet that found him. And yet, there's something hauntingly human about him, a man who loved his family deeply, but could never separate protection from domination. He once told a friend, "If you stop moving, they'll bury you." Maybe that's why he never truly rested, not in life, not in death. Today, his name lives in documentaries, books, and the uneasy fascination of people drawn to the darkness he mastered. But behind every headline is a truth he could never escape: power without peace is just another kind of prison. He outlived the world he built, not because he was lucky, but because he never broke his word. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gangster stories like this one.